third line down from the the second section on page Kuf Yud. The line begins with Nevuah b'mokim acher. We started talking over here about the chochmah as it is contained within the essence before it reveals itself, before it has the effect on bringing out the midas. And it's described as Yidiyas Atzmoy, knowing himself. And by knowing himself, he knows the Torah. So we discuss it briefly. How is knowing himself synonymous with knowing the Torah? So the simple mashal that gives us a kind of an approach to recognize this Inyan is what we see. The many aspects that we talked about, but one very simple, most obvious thing I think that is closest to our mind is a home. A home, as we've spoken many times, and we know that a home is an essential aspect of the human being. Not an essential in terms that he needs it. It is part of the truth of what he is in the world. Right. And as soon as one thinks of a home, one immediately begins to recognize and identify everything that fills the home. Now those things that fill the home, like the furnishings, the essential furnishings of a home. And the furnishings does not mean only chairs and tables, but it means everything else that comes along. The set of dishes, the pots and pans, everything else, everything that constitutes a home. These things that constitute a home are part and parcel of the truth of what a home is. These are not add-ons, additional functional additions. But this is part of the initial definition of a home. So that although a home is, so to speak, a total encompassment of this area, of this space, and the human being and everything else, in this encompassment there are unlimited details that are direct outcome, direct expression of what the home is. So push that box out. Thank you.
So true, the nimshal is.
So the nimshal is. Before we go to the mishal, I want to give a mashal from a different mashal that will be closer to the nimshal. Once we understand this, we will understand how this is also the truth of a melech. See, a melech b'lo am. A melech, the full presence of a melech is when there is a presence of the am. Am is a whole variety of people, in a whole nation that consists of unlimited possibilities of different kind of people. And all that is representing the Melech. The Melech is what inspires and enables and empowers all that takes place within his nation. Which means that the Melech, in his essential reality, are inherently contained these unlimited varieties and possibilities. These things do not spring forth after the fact. There's a necessity for this is created, this is in response to any kind of other need. The Melech himself creates all of these possibilities and creates all of these needs. To take a very simple illustration of this, you make the bracha in the morning, and I urge everybody to try and learn the Bichas HaShachar. And one of the first Bichas HaShachar is Malbish Arumim. He dresses up the naked. Now, what is this implication? What does it mean he dresses up the naked? You get up in the morning, you put on your own clothes. Malbish Arumim means that he, with his spirit, with his inspiration, with his glory that he provides for the world, honor, that inspires the human being to put on clothes. That gives human being the sense that there is a supreme reality in which he functions, in which he's whereabouts. And in honor.
To remain on this call, press 1.
If they're not going to a chance. 1.
Returning to the conference room.
This glory, so to speak, is revealed into the world from the Creator, from the Melech. As a result of that, we little human beings sense that there is a greater reality, a supreme glory in which we function. As a result of that, we are compelled to put on clothes because our own presence is elevated to a much higher status. We are not just little bodily creatures. We are spirits in the body.
This refers to what we said in the beginning, chochmah, in essence, before it goes into midas.
Okay, good. let's keep on one track, please.
Well, we've gone through two mashalim. Just wondering.
The mashalim are only to give us to get us to the point where we can recognize how a greater thing influences a lower thing. Like a home influences the details in the home.
And the king contains the variety of his kingdom.
Of his kingdom. Exactly.
And down to guys getting dressed in the morning.
Down to the point of the guy getting why? Because he's he's in the presence of a higher spirit.
So to the main nimshal, the main point we started with was that
okay. This is to explain the inyan that he says, B'diyas atzmi ideyas atayra. Knowing himself and knows the Torah. Which means, through this mashal, atzmi is that divine reality that encompasses and provides ultimately for all that comes into being, that inspires all that comes into being.
It's all equivalent to him knowing himself.
And from knowing himself, this is where it is drawn from.
Torah originates in Yediyas Atzmai.
That's right. Let me explain the principle of Yediyas Atzmai. Knowing himself. What's the point of not? We're still going to come to this, but I just want to, so that we don't get to the first. What does it mean, Yediyas Atzmai? What is the point of that? If it's a himself, so he already has it. The point of Yediyas Atzmai is that ultimately, when all of these things become revealed, and there is chochmah, and there is all the variety that chochmah provides for, these all things, the entire existence, are not newcomers that have no basis in the truth. They are all revelations, minute revelations, and to tzimtzumim of what the truth is.
All the details are minute revelations.
Right.
All the yeshus, all the things. Individual halachas, getting dressed.
Everything. Everything contains an inspiration, a spirit behind it, the divine truth. These things, this is something which should be readily understandable, except we never think of it. That's why I'm giving so many mashalim, because this mashalim is what brings it back to us and shows to us the reality of this. When you're walking in the street, you're walking on over here on Crown Street. This Crown Street, as it is designed, could be any place, could be a Mars, like we always say, a Mars. The same kind of a structure could be a Mars. But when you're walking on Crown Street, are you walking on Crown Street exclusively?
No.
You're walking on Crown Street, that's part of Brooklyn, of Crown Heights, and part of Brooklyn, part of New York, part of the US.
Which is if to say inside his world as opposed to on
That's right. In other words, there is a whole encompassment, a whole reality that ultimately trickles down on the small level of being Crown Street. And at this particular address on Crown Street.
And there's no basis for that reality except him. It's not enough.
Exactly.
It's not enough to say I'm in America, or there's no nation. The nation itself is just a derivative of his reality. It's not enough.
He
to
provides
say,
him the reality for everything else.
Yeah.
This is a good illustration of the principle. This is the principle of ideas, ideas at Torah. Everything that ultimately reveals itself originated and has a presence and has a root in his truth. This is what we are learning now in Punapartas. And now we're going to start inside the fourth line from the beginning of that section. Mavur b'makim acher. It's explained elsewhere. This is going to be a kind of illustration on the very simplest level, but we all have to to relate to it and see the reality of it. It's explained elsewhere that this is similar. As for example, like the thought and speech. What is like machshava dibur? The chochmah as it's contained in Ein Sof, and then afterward the chochmah as it comes forth begili, which is like machshava and dibur.
This is to illustrate Yedias Atzmai.
That's right. Now what's machshava and dibur? Machshava is thought. Now what is what are these two? What is the relationship between these two? And what is the difference between them? Machshava is thought. I'd like if you should understand the principle of thought. Because these are things that we have commonly, and we are practicing this totally unawares. We don't realize how potent machshava is. Machshava is identifying and defining on a revealed level that which is a truth, an internal truth.
To remain on this call, press 1. Returning to the conference room.
You enter a room and you immediately have an identity, a sense of what this room is about. Or even before that, this is a room, this is a human abode. At whatever level you begin to identify. All of these identifying aspects are known to you as real entity in your thought. There is a higher level at which you know it. which is the essential truth as it makes sense to you. And then you're able to think about it. You're able to think about it. You have already translated this on an external, an observer's level. Prior to that, you're inside. Then you begin to identify, where are you? In machshava, you already have, you're identifying that which you have identified personally, internally first, and then it comes into conscious thought. This is a room, or this is a this and a that.
Even though thought is very private, it's the conscious level.
It's very private.
Based on what is pre-conscious or what is more central.
That's right. In machshava, the interesting thing, very important, thought employs language. Very subtle language. It may be our own language. It may not be a formal language. But in fact, we do think with some kind of a language. In that language, we can mix every language that's familiar to us. We will mix it in order to be able to just to think through a certain thing. What is the significance of that it's a language? Significance of that is that it is now known, as I said, as an observer, from an observer's perspective. It is now known as an entity unto itself, not how you experience it, but as an entity unto itself. It is a piece of your knowledge. This knowledge ultimately can translate into imparting this information to others, which is the next stage. In order to translate it into imparting to others, this machshava has to then go down a rung and become dibur. The way it is in machshava, you can't speak it. You have to reformat it and give it a formal presence in order to be able to present it to others. This is in the union of machshava and dibur. Okay, let's look inside now. In the middle of the fourth line. The inyan ha-dibur hu, the inyan of dibur, of speech, hu rak b'shvil hazoros. It is exclusively for the sake of others. There's no speaking to oneself. To oneself you think, but you don't speak. Either dibur is exclusively for others. Ma she'en kein machshava, which is not so in machshava. I'd like to call attention and read these words correctly. Ma she'en kein machshava, which is different in machshava. When you say it's different, it's so obvious or different. But you have to point to the difference. The thing is, yes, it's different, but it's not that dramatically different. Because machshava has a conscious knowledge. Machshava is not the way you know it in your nefesh. It's a conscious knowledge, awareness. So there is a similarity between machshava and dibur, except that dibur is for the sake of others, whereas machshava is knowing for yourself. Hulagalis, machshava is also a gilu, a revelation. But it is to reveal Helam Ho'atzmi. Helam Ho'atzmi, the internal concealment, that which is true to yourself, Legabe Atzmi. Know yourself, to know what is transpired in your own intellect. This is Gilui Helam Ho'atzmi. Why is it called Helam Ho'atzmi? The essential, the essential, and in other words, the concealment on an essential level. Why is it concealed? Because this is not something which exists after it is identified, after it begins to function. This is in the nefesh itself. This is the truth of the human nefesh. Like we say, coming back to our mashal of the home exists in the human being before he even identifies a home, before he even becomes aware of the significance of a home. Because that's the essential presence of a human being. Machshava is a gilui of helam ho'atzmi legabe atzmai. To himself, he begins to know who he is. That he is not to be floating around in the wild west. He has to have a place for himself, and he has to be, so to speak, in a civilized environment, within a village, or within a street, and so forth. Because he has to have a definitive identity. Why does he have to have an identity? Because he is a definitive identity. Because he is a real thing. So machshava, it's an interesting thing in machshava. Machshava is, as you said, machshava is also a formal type of presentation. It's also with letters and words and a language. It's also, so to speak, from an observer's perspective. But this observer has access to the very private crevices of the mind. And therefore it's not correct to call them a machshava as an observer. It is called a revealing one's own truth to oneself. He makes himself an observer of himself, thereby enabling to transmit that which he observes to others. This is the pshat in the words, a machshava legal is helam ho'atzmi legabe atzmus. So this machshava dibu, the Rebbe says, is similar to the
To remain on this call, press 1.
To the union of moichin and midis. In like manner, as we saw the relationship and the status of machshava versus dibur, similarly, hu hadugma is the reflection binyan zayat achtoines v'gimel rishonis. Zayat achtoines means the 7 lower spheres, qualities, which is midos, and gimel rishonis are the 3 upper former spheres, which is chochmah, bina, v'dalos, which is the moich. Zayin tachtoines, this is like dibur. Gimel rishonis is like machshava. Again, just to bring it back home, chochmah, bina, b'das, and midas, these are all personal experiences. These personal experiences do not get created at the point of the experience. They're revealing that the essence of the neshama from a higher level, from a concealed level. It's revealing what the neshama is to oneself. Your own neshama, what it stands for into yourself. This is the Gimel Rishonos and Zayin Tachtonos. The Moichin and the Midas. The Zayin Tachtonos, let's try the next slide a little bit. We still have a few couple minutes. Zayin Tachtonos will be Shvil Ha'olamis. The lower 7 qualities are Bishvil Ha'olamis, is for the sake of world. Just like Dibur is for the sake of others. The Gimel Rishonos is the 3 top qualities for first revelations. Hein, they represent Mashe B'Dias Atzmoi. That, by which we explained before, by Mashe B'Dias Atzmoi, knowing himself, Yoideya, he knows. By knowing himself, he knows. There's a knowledge in knowing oneself, which is kind of an odd type of a statement, but it's very, very real. It is like knowing oneself as an outsider, but you're not an outsider. You know it from inside, but you know it as clearly as if you were observing it. As distinct knowledge. This is called the ideas.
Can I ask something?
Yes. Yes.